Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Woman in Between podcast. I am so excited about this episode and definitely appreciate everyone dropping a line, putting a question in. This episode is going to be a reintroduction. I know we've dropped a few episodes. We have some amazing guests on here in the past few episodes that we released. And I'm really excited to just kind of reintroduce who the Woman in Between is, the intention for this podcast, and then get into a few questions and let you guys know about me. So let's dive in. I'm a huge podcast lover. So my favorite podcasts to listen to are typically like any true crime podcasts. So shout out to Dateline and shout out to Crime Junkie. I am an OG fan. But I also realize that when I'm listening to true crime podcasts a little too much is when I need to give myself a little bit more self-care and I might not be in the best headspace. And so that's when I started to listen to some podcasts like Balanced Black Girl, which was a game changer for me, like I've mentioned on some previous episodes. And really focusing on how do I want to create the life that I want, especially now that I've taken the time to really come back to myself after my divorce. So the funny thing is, when I started this podcast initially, I was actually married, and the intention behind it was to get me and some of my married girlfriends, and we sit around a table with wine, and we kind of bring you guys into, our Friday night wine night conversations. And that's kind of as far as it went. Unfortunately, during that time period, I wasn't confident enough to drive it forward. I thought a lot of, behind this idea was really dependent on, getting help and other people and how would I do this. And, also just being nervous to put something, yourself out there or your own idea out there. And so I really sat on this concept of having my own podcast and putting content out there and igniting conversation really on hold. And over that time period, I end up having my second child, and then I went through a separation, and then I went through a divorce, and then I found myself in a more manager level position. That was also new for me, and a lot of transitions that were happening kind of back to back to back, or so it felt like at the time. And, especially after going through my divorce, probably a year and a half after, spent a good amount of time building community with people going through divorce, people going through separation, single parents, people that had lost jobs, especially after the pandemic, and seeing how it shaped them. And sitting in rooms with people that were bearing their souls in, really dark times, and being able to watch them successfully transition out of there with support, whether it be therapy, support groups, getting out of relationships, getting into relationships, new jobs, but seeing people just navigate gracefully. And for me, I also saw that with people that had really close relationships with the Lord and how that was manifesting in their lives. And so I was able to have the opportunity to watch that as I was going through some transitions and becoming confident and comfortable in the transitions that I was going through, especially not even eliminating, but working through the shame that I felt going through my divorce, being divorced, identifying as that, identifying as a single mom. I had to really get past that and find coping mechanisms essentially. And so once I hit that point, I just felt like no matter what room I walked into, I was just really in this like in between space that I was consistently pivoting just in my role, right? In the hats that I wore. And one being, a single mom. But yes, there are some times where I don't have my kids. So then, in that room, I might come across as single. But then there's the other majority where I have my kids and I'm a mom. I'm also, an employee, right? I am a daughter. I am a sister. And then I had those elements where I'm looking around the room and I'm the only one that's not a part of the married club. But I've been married before, so I know what marriage is, right? Or, so I just felt like I was having to adjust myself in every space that I was in. And I didn't really feel like I felt like I was in a certain category anymore. And I think that goes for a lot of us where we're just so multifaceted. Our experiences have shaped us, right? And we kind of grow to be this multifaceted person that we want to pour into. And that's what I was discovering. And I wanted to speak to that. And I had seen a lot of really, strong, intelligent people that went through some dark times. And I watched them utilize their resources and I watched them open up and be vulnerable and end up on the better end and really learning like our experiences, they shape us, right? But the traumatic ones, they don't necessarily define us. They add different layers and avenues. And I think for me, during those transitions, I had the opportunity to really build out the community that I wanted, and I didn't even realize it at the time. So I think life transitions and the vulnerability that comes from it can really lend to building community, which is also a passion for mine. So I wanted to start a podcast for people that had gone through these transitions, whether it's, you were in a marriage and you got a divorce, maybe you were in a relationship and you separated, maybe you weren't in a relationship and you had kids, maybe you're transitioning in your career, maybe you're moving, maybe you transition into a single mom. And I think that there is a voice for all of those spaces, and I can't be that singular voice, which is why I pull on some of the guests that we have had to add their perspective, to add color, and to hopefully hold a mirror to the stories that you hold in your heart. So that was the intention behind this. And I try not to stick so closely to the plans that I make. But, my goal is to build community on this podcast, to offer transparency, to lend grace, so you can do the same for yourself and the people around you, to help empower you if that's what you're looking for, to provide resources. I don't know everything, but I can at least find something. Shout out to Google. So yeah, I'm really excited that I went through those transitions to build the confidence to even open up this space. I have said since I started this podcast, it is an act of vulnerability and doing something that honestly terrifies me. So that is why the woman in between, that is my intention behind the woman in between. We're all just kind of living through, different roles, different transitions. So like I said, I do have 2 kids. I am a single mom. I have been divorced for a few years now, and I am actually a project manager in the talent acquisition space. So I have a commitment to serve on it for a single parent nonprofit that I'm incredibly passionate about, and have found that service is the healthiest way for me to give because I am a recovering people pleaser. And yeah, and anything on the water, I'm a Pisces. So if you listen to the podcast, you already know. I think the Pisces energy comes out for sure. So yeah, there is a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm always wanting to share as much as, I can. Obviously, during this podcast, you're curious about more than me. And I think that this is a good plug to say, if you're not subscribed to our channel, we are on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Music. So like, subscribe, and also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, looking to get on TikTok soon. So follow us and tune in every other Tuesday because it's a good time. Or follow me. Yeah. So I actually opened up the chat on Instagram and wanted to hear from you. And I wanted to hear some of the questions that you might have, whether it's from episodes that you had listened to or just out of curiosity that maybe I could dive more into. And you guys delivered, the questions, they're good. They are good. And I am going to try to answer these to my best ability. And if you feel like you need to hear more, let me know and we can start spinning these off into separate episodes. I'm happy to do that. But let's jump into it. So, the first question: what advice do you have for dating in your early 20s? Short story, don't do it. I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But as somebody dated in their 20s and actually was in long-term relationships in my 20s, I think through college I was in a 4-year relationship. And then right after that, that's when, I met my ex and marriage and all that happened. But even in high school, I was in a long-term relationship. I don't know. It's a thing that fortunately I have broken. That was not the question though. The first piece of advice is obviously listen to your gut. I think especially as women, we have that inkling when something isn't right, when something doesn't feel safe, and it doesn't have to just be physically safe. It can be emotionally safe, mentally, spiritually. We have those goosies or like those hair raising moments or just those moments where like this doesn't feel right. Listen to that. Always listen to that. Trust yourself enough. And that was something that I struggled with, where because I felt like this relationship or this person was so important, I was completely fine neglecting what I knew what was best for myself. And that caused me to get into a lot of situations and mainly allowed a lot of hurt to enter my life because I simply did not listen to myself. And that is a form of self-sabotage. So if you are, for me, I was struggling with confidence. So I wasn't confident in myself, which I definitely wasn't confident in how I felt or what my gut was telling me. So I was naturally not going to listen to it. So, right, the first step is really working on the self-worth part to then trust yourself in the decisions that you're making or the feelings that you're making and being confident to actually act on them. And then, oh my gosh, I feel like there's so much advice for dating in your 20s that I wish I would have listened to. But I would also say listen to your friends. And I say that with the caveat of these friends, they need to really understand who you are. They need to be loyal friends, and they need to be friends that are going to be honest with you. And now I can say I didn't always have those friends collectively, but through every relationship that I had at least 1 to 2 of my like lifelong best friends that could have input because they knew what I went through and they knew what I desired. So they were able to identify, like, I don't know if you can get what you need from this situation. And it's not to say let other people dictate your relationship, right? You know who you can trust. But for me, I have 2 or 3 friends that know me to my core and they have seen the relationships that I have come from and how that has impacted me. And I have trust them with my life because they pull through every time. If they see that someone isn't right for me and they vocalize it, I do listen. Maybe not the first time and maybe not the second time, but I do listen. So, yeah. And then, okay, so there's 2 other ones. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I do think we might need another episode. Don't let a man tell you twice that he doesn't want you. Save yourself the heartache. Don't do that to yourself. And I want to say a man does not have to verbally say that. He can show you. He can show you. Don't let him tell you and don't let him show you multiple times that he doesn't want you. And you keep coming back and you keep running back and you keep trying to fix it. If I would have listened to that piece of advice, a lot of things would be different because I spent so much time fighting for a man that wanted nothing to do with me that I forgot how to fight for myself. They tell you, and Yes, he meant what he said. Yes, he knows what he's doing. Go. And that's all I have to say about that. And then the last thing, don't let love be a distraction. And I say this as somebody that struggled with that. I think having being raised in the church, there's kind of this narrative that marriage is the ultimate goal and marriage is where you find value. And marriage is a beautiful thing. Have it like having been in one, it is a beautiful thing. It is not the thing. It is not the goal. And it's not the ultimate like value maker. You know, you can still be an amazing person and not be married. There's a lot of married people that are still unfulfilled. Please know that. So I think understanding like it doesn't have to be the goal, and that's a lot, that's hard to break, right? You know, upbringing plays into that, and for a lot of us it is truly on our heart, that is truly something that we desire. And so I get that, but I think the real work in finding the person for you lays in doing the work for yourself and pursuing the purpose that God has given you. And so I think we all have purpose. I think we all have a divine prophecy that God has placed on us. And that's what we should be pursuing. And the goal is, right, that the person that aligns with you and that purpose will follow you. But so many times you can get distracted by just the quick fixes or the facade or the gold plated gestures. I've done this and I've become misaligned from my purpose, misaligned from my goals. And then I end up wondering, anyways, where was the connection? Because this isn't connected to my purpose. Love and the guys, it can be a distraction, especially if it's something that your heart really desires. And I'm saying this is somebody that has faulted for it. So we're gonna need more time. We're gonna need more time on that. Um, so the second question was, do you have any regrets in your decision to completely call it quits? Or was it your decision? And I love how these questions came in, because the first one came in as far as, do you have any regrets on your decision to completely quit it? Which I don't have any regrets. And you know, I've gotten this question before, and I think it's, you know, it's interesting because when people see you doing really well, there can sometimes be this like implied judgment that you were the one to end things. You know, yeah, I made a decision, but I think I responded to a situation that I was placed in. And I didn't like the fact that I had to make a decision. Um, and don't have regrets because, to be honest, had that not happened, I would not have become the woman that I am today. The person that I was when I was married, she did not have confidence in herself. She didn't know how to stand up for herself. She didn't know really who she was and what fulfilled her. She was really hard on herself. And I speak about it past tense because I really try to lend myself grace and the versions of myself. I mean, I think we should all do that, lend ourselves grace to the versions that we were in the past. And that version of myself really, really wanted that marriage. But at a certain point, you have to realize when the room is not for you and it's not working for you. Like nothing is making sense. You can't figure it out. It's not working in your favor. It's hurting you physically, emotionally, spiritually. And especially when you have kids, they're, you know, you have to be able to read that room. And for me, I don't have any regrets because my kids will never know that version of me. You know, they won't know the woman that accepted mistreatment. They don't know that version, and I'm happy that they don't. They're not going to know, you know, the yelling and the scream. They're not going to have those memories, at least in my home. So it's really hard to regret that because I know what I would have been staying in, and think the entire experience has allowed me to develop a sense of empathy for those that have gone through this path and that are going through this path, and those of us on the other side. I've been able to see this beautiful collective of people that have navigated some really dark waters and still managed to find light. And then I think it's allowed me to really find out who Jaleesa is. I feel like I shaped myself around what I thought that marriage was and kind of created that as my identity. When that ended, I feel like I had lost myself to this identity that was really never mine in the first place. So I needed that break. It kind of broke a lot of how I viewed relationships and how I want to operate in relationships and what I need from relationships and what I've been, really lacking for some time, and would not have had that opportunity if I would have stayed in what I was in. I would have never seen a need to be anything outside of a wife or a mother. I would have never taken the time to figure out who is Jaleesa at her core, because we should be able to excite ourselves with just ourselves. Like the feeling of being excited to be you, being with yourself. Like you should be able to have joy in that. And I didn't have joy in that. I couldn't even look myself in the mirror. So I needed to break free from that. And I am so grateful that I did. And I'm so grateful that I was given an opportunity, obviously, to live a life in marriage. It's unfortunate that I did not get to have that fulfilled, but I am seeing fulfillment in the life that I have now, which leads to the next question. What has it been like finding yourself again after going through a divorce? It has been thrilling. It has been terrifying, because I find myself in moments where I'm like, oh, like it really didn't have to be like this. It didn't, or, I'll find myself in, especially dating. And dating was very therapeutic for me, but it made me realize, like, Jaleesa, you really didn't deserve to go through all that. Like, you didn't need all of that. And that's heartbreaking. Realize what you allow. And I also think realizing how sick I probably was, warped my brain was. And I think a good example is, like, I started a weight loss journey, and not even really as a weight loss journey, just more of a lifestyle change a year ago. And over that time, I've been blessed, yes, to lose weight and to change. But even as I look back at the pictures and I'm comparing, and yes, I've lost weight, it's like, Jaleesa, you really weren't like that big. But I was made to feel that way. And to break that thought process for myself has been beautiful, but also heartbreaking. There's this weird dichotomy that I feel like I'm constantly going back and forth. And I think for most of us that have been through grief, it feels like that, where there's these beautiful, unexpected moments, but they are also heartbreaking because you're breaking these thought processes that you've clung so yeah. But I think I've mentioned the community. When I was married, I was not close knitted to the single parent community, the divorce community, and boy, was I missing out, because there is a multitude of resilience in those spaces. And to date, I've been able to create some of the strongest relationships, and relationships that breathe life through scripture. And I'm sure, right, I think I could have found that in marriage, but I think going through that time period was the catalyst that I needed. And it has allowed me to see what spaces I really enjoy again, and what I want to keep and not keep in my life. It's been a beautiful, reflective, heartbreaking experience. Okay, these are so good. These are so good. Okay, so is there anything you wish you did differently when going through your separation? Honestly, I wish I would have spent more time focusing me as an individual and what I needed and where I needed to grow versus what did I need to do to fix the marriage. Like I was hyper fixated on this side, which was way over my head looking back of, well, you can fix this. Like figure out what the root of the problem is, which is naturally me. Figure out the root of the problem and you can fix it. And you can't change people. You can't control what people do. You can literally only control yourself and the access that you allow other people to yourself. That's it. And so I had it in my head that I could control this narrative. And boy, was I trying to control it. And in my therapy sessions, I was using those sessions in the beginning of more of like, how do I change who I am to make this relationship work? And the question really should have been, am I happy? Why am I not happy? What do I need? How do I express what I need? Like, those were places that I needed to be in. And I think I also should have spent more time in that separation period. And I'll say, me and my ex, we separated twice. And unfortunately, like most people, logistically separating can be complicated and it can be expensive. And I think the first time we both definitely felt that pressure financially, managing two different houses, someone staying with someone else, like the time pressure becomes huge. And so I wish we would have really spent more time creating a well thought out plan of like, what is this separation going to, look like time wise, financially. But if I'm being honest with you, I think even if it was well thought out, unfortunately, things were so far gone that I don't even think it would have worked. But I would say for anyone that is going through that period, like, handle the logistics of it first. It is a very emotional time period, but handle the logistics of where are people going to be staying? How much is this going to be financially? And I would not let that scare you. I think that's where you have to lean in on faith and take the time to live separate lives. Because during the time that we were separated the first time, maybe for like 3 months and then the next time for like 7. But during that time, I started being able to trust myself because I was spending the time learning about myself versus trying to fix the relationship. But that took 3 months, right? Just to get to that point. So give yourself the time, fill out the separation and focus on you. Not how you can fix the other person, not how you can fix the marriage as a whole. You can't. You can only fix you, or focus on you. Okay, so then the next question: what advice would you give younger Jaleesa? Girl, don't drink that Ruppelman. That's what I would tell her. Crazy. So honestly, okay, the first would be what is for you will move towards you. I think younger Jaleesa, and I would probably even go to as young as 10, 11, would kind of mold myself into spaces that I really didn't fit into, or that really weren't serving me. Whether it's, I didn't have a lot in common with the people and I was forcing relationships, or I was in relationships that were toxic for me, that weren't benefiting the goals that I had. And when the rejection would come from people, or even taking jobs that really weren't a good fit, when the rejection would come, it would be devastating, absolutely devastating. And then I would look back and be like, well, they weren't really for you in the first place. Like you weren't even supposed to be engaging with them in the first place. And I think that speaks to, definitely like my relationships in high school and college where like I really didn't have a lot in common with them. We just happened to be in the same kind of group settings and whatnot, and I kind of contorted myself. And, those relationships went for a long time because I could do that. But there was a lot of strife, there was a lot of confusion. Neither one of us were happy at a certain time period. It's like you're pursuing the wrong things. And you shouldn't have to chase, and convince, because I would do that, chasing and convincing and trying to sell myself. Is like, if you have to do all that, they're not for you. You should be able to walk into the room and what's for you is going to be moving towards you. And I've even applied that approach to jobs. Like, if I notice it starts becoming too complicated and too confusing, and, I'm struggling for my voice to be heard, and that is a big indicator, then it's not for me. So we talk about, right, being seen and being heard. That is vital. If you don't feel that in the spaces that you're in, they're not the spaces for you. It's not the people for you. And then, obviously listen to your instincts, trust your gut. Now that has served me well. I still struggle with it, but I always say, God is not the author of confusion. So if there's confusion there and I feel it, it's typically probably not for me. And I remember I went to this party maybe back in the spring, and typically that is really my scene. And it's like, let's have a good time. Let's do what we want. And just in my gut, I was like, this is not somewhere I want to be. I'd rather be doing something else that's just better geared towards my goals. And it's not to say anything I'm better or not, because look, I can party with the rest of them. But it just wasn't for me. And I listened to myself, and, I felt like I got more out of it, and I build more trust that way by listening to myself. And then the last thing would be, you are not going to be for everyone. You can't be. And even if you try to be the person for every single body and please every single person, they can still leave you. They can still talk about you, turn their backs on you. It does not matter. Stop putting your effort in trying to be for everybody. And this is something that at 34 years old, I still have to practice, but I have found so much relief in this idea of, I don't have to be this for you. And having the courage to say, even if that means I'm the villain in your story, I still need to be able to sleep at night with me. And so when I talk about contorting myself to fit spaces and to fit people, and I think we all do this, and I think ultimately, like, that's a part of why my marriage wasn't working, that it was very clear that that person did not want to be with me. But instead, I pushed and I pushed and I contorted and I focused on the other person, and I didn't focus, and I played every type of role, ran every type of script that you could, and it still wasn't right because it wasn't right for me. And I'm saying this not as like a martyr, but also saying as like, having dated other people, I never had to contort myself to that degree. I was able to show up as who I was, and that was celebrated. So I have learned I'm not putting the extra effort to try to make myself into something that is acceptable for you, because it is going to distract me from being able to determine if you're somebody that's for me or if this situation is for me. You cannot be for everyone. And I say this to myself in the mirror, and it should also give you some relief, because you're putting weight on. And I was putting weight on, and I'm still currently taking weight off. And it is too much. So I say this all the time. I am a recovering people pleaser. It is something that I'm working on. I have to ask myself every day, is this something that you are really able to do? Do you have the energy for it? And really stopping myself, because you can't pour in everybody's cup. So I hope that I answered those questions to your liking. and that I shared everything that was helpful. But please let me know. Drop it in the feedback chat or on socials if you want to hear any more about any of these topics or questions, or we can even open the line up again. But I'm really excited to just share a little bit more about my journey. We will continue to dive into that, and as I thread little pieces through each episode. But I just hope you know that no matter where you are in your journey or what path you're taking, you are valued and you're loved and you deserve all of the best things, especially grace. So be gracious to yourself. My little one is already waving for me good night. So thank you, and I will see you in our next episode. Bye.